Hi everybody. I'm going to stand here for just a minute and give a few people time to come on. Those of you who are joining us, haven't joined us before, we're the Wise Guys, Cheryl and Elaine at the Sewing Basket in Plymouth, Wisconsin. And we're going to be talking about quilting today. We have all kinds of samples of projects, and it's going to be quilting in a method that we haven't talked about before. So, do we have a couple people on and joining us?
11.
Okay, we got 11 so far.
13.
Oh, I was going to say, I'll wait until we have 12. Now that we have 13 and counting, we're going to... And a heart, all right. And you should be able to hear me because I have my mic on and the camera on. We should be in good shape. So today we're going to talk about quilting. Quilting is, as those of you, most of you know, putting your layers together. Your top, your batting, and back have to be held together. And there are all kinds of issues to deal with quilting, how close, what design, all of those things. We're not going to talk about any of that today. We're going to talk about just the fun of different ways, a different way to quilt. And as soon as I tell you the method, about half of you are going to think I'm going to click off. Please don't do that. Please stay with us because I'm going to show you some fun things. You know that you can quilt by hand. And I just heard all of you wrinkle your nose. I can hear that. And you can quilt with straight line quilting. And you can stitch in the ditch. And you can use decorative stitches. And you can use free motion quilting with rulers. You can take your quilt to a long armor. All different ways to quilt your quilt. But I like to quilt my own quilts. And my favorite way to quilt is, okay, no clicking off, with an embroidery machine. I want to show you all the things that you can do. Over the last couple of years, Cheryl and I have talked often about the fact that quilting with your embroidery machine is really a cool thing, and the majority of machines that we have sold have been to quilters for quilting, who never realized that embroidery machines work for that purpose. Typically, when I first started an embroidery machine, to me that meant put your name on your shirt, maybe a little bird on a sweatshirt, something like that. That wasn't my thing. I like applique quilts and I like fancy quilting. Well, then we found out there's all different ways that you can quilt with your embroidery machine. So I'm going to show you a whole bunch of different looks that you can get on an embroidery machine quilting, just a kind of a little trunk show of methods. And then I'm going to go over the machine and show you just a couple quick steps. This is not a class on how to quilt with your embroidery machine. This is an inspirational look at all the cool things you can do and learn how to do if you happen to use an embroidery machine for quilting. So hopefully we still have at least 13 of 26. You hanging on. All right.
We've doubled.
So please stay with us. So my little sign here asks me how I quilt. This flower was stitched on the embroidery machine. And some of the machines have one simple button that I push the button and it's stippled automatically around that. I'm going to flip it over to the back because it might be a little easier to see where the edge is. So my hoop was this big, and what I did is I stitched that flower and I pushed the magic stipple button and it automatically filled in that background for me. Pretty cool at the touch of a button. The other thing that I can do is adjust the size of that stippling. It brings it up in a standard size. I can make that stipple closer together down to almost micro stippling, or I can make it really big to just even a couple inches apart. So that's one of the things I can do on an embroidery machine with just the push of a button. The next thing that I can do is use shapes that are built into the machine. Even the smallest of machines has this feature, at least on Brother brand. We have the choice of shapes. I can do circles, squares, diamonds, hearts, badges, octagons, all different, mostly geometric shapes. And I can call them up and put a whole bunch of them on my screen, and I can make them different sizes. On this quilt, what I did is I called up a circle. And Cheryl, can you see those okay?
Zoom in here.
Okay.
Yep.
So these circles Down here is where you can see? Okay, so in these circles, what I did is I put a circle in my machine, called it up, it's already built in, and said, okay, give me a few more. So I copied it, and then I moved one over here and shrank it. I moved one over here and shrank it. Moved another one over here, so I can make them larger and smaller, and I can put them anywhere I want. So I took my hoop, and I put a bunch of circles in it. I hoop, stitch that part, grab my hoop, and move over. I'm going to talk about hoops for a second right now so it makes sense as we move on to other quilts. Hoops come in all different sizes, and there's something called hoop envy, because in embroidery, we'll just say size matters. The bigger your hoop, the more you can do. This is the littlest hoop. There's actually a little tiny one that's only 2 inches square, but nobody uses that one much. This is a 4-inch hoop. So I could do that circle. I could do just one of them. And I could put those all over my quilt, and I'd have to hoop every time for one little circle. Then I go to a 5x7 hoop. I could get these 3 into that hoop. Don't have to hoop as many times, but still have to hoop a lot. The next one is 6x10, a much bigger space. The 6x10 is really comfortably the size that makes quilting with your embroidery machine fun. If you're using these 2 smaller hoops on a bigger project, it's very, very putsy. It's really nice to get that 6x10 hoop or up from there. Not that you can't do it here, it just isn't as much fun. If I'm doing runners or smaller projects, I can do them, but I just don't have anywhere near the choice of designs. So this is a 6x10. And then from there, I have...
And you can get that on the smaller machines?
Yes, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. Yep. So here, I can get a lot more. I can get this whole section into this 8x12 hoop. And then this one is 9.5 by 12. I can get even more in. And then the big honkin' one is 10 5/8. Golly gee, you wouldn't want to say 10.5. 10 5/8 by 16. So really a big area. So when you look at quilting your quilt, if I'm using this size versus this size, this one I can still do it. I just have to hoop more times. The larger my hoop, the less times I need to hoop my quilt. So I'm going to set these aside for a minute, and we're going to talk about hoop size again in a little bit, but that gives you the idea of what you can do. So on this one, built-in circles in my machine, I just put them in to fill the hoop however I want, and I hoop and just keep moving around my quilt and stitching them out. So this one is just built-in shapes. The quilt right behind me was done with a design that was built into the machine. I have a little template here.
Let me zoom in.
You see that?
Yep.
This was built on the machine. I just hooped a piece of stabilizer and stitched it kind of as a template to see if I liked it. This quilt is made from our Rachel's Heart pattern that we just sewed 9 blocks together. And I used this to place, get a visual of how my hearts would be quilted and how they would fit. They're in all different colors here. Some you see more than others. But there's one of these in these. And this is a design built into one of the machines. All the machines have different built-in designs. Some are large, some are small. And you can also purchase designs. We'll be talking about that too. But so this was 9 hoopings. 1 on each heart, and I'm ready to go. The next one is another built-in method. This is these little curly cues. So this is a design on a built-in, one of the designs built into the machine. To me, it looked like a little windy swirl. So I called up one, and then I duplicated it a bunch of times, and I rotated it. So it just looked like they were sort of spread all over my quilt. And this is the quilt.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay, and on the back you can just see the swirls. And as I quilted this, I used a hoop that was this big. So I had 1, 2, 3 hoopings, 4, 5, 6. So hoop it 6 times and my whole quilt is quilted.
And about how long does it take to stitch that design out?
This design is about 4 minutes.
Okay.
These are all running stitches. It's not a satin stitch, so it stitches really, really quick. All right. Next one is also a built-in design. This is a feature that's only available on some of the larger machines. The machines have what's called a design center. So you don't need software, but you can actually create things inside the machine. And on this one, this is our little elephant quilt. And when we quilted this, I wanted to have that feel of the African animals. So what I did is I called up a design in the machine. There was this little rhinoceros in the machine, and there's a button that you can push that gives you the outline of the design. So I picked the rhino, I said, give me just the outline, and I took one, and then I duplicated it, I made it smaller, and then I duplicated it so I have mama and 2 babies. And that's the size of my hoop. And you can see, here's mama and 2 babies.
Oh, let me get over there.
Okay, can you see that?
Yep.
And I think you might be able to see it even better on the, no, it's hard to see. But anyway, mama and the babies are all over the quilt. Okay, and that's my quilting. And that was as simple as, you know me, I'm going to say, and then you just. Well, yes, there are a couple things you need to do, but you pick your design, pick the outline, make a couple of them, and then hoop and quilt. My layers are all inside my hoop, my batting, my backing, everything. I can pin base them together, or I can use my micro tack. Lots of things we're not going to talk about today, but just like when you quilt a quilt regularly, you still need to hold your layers together. The next one is another built-in design. This one, I took the letter W and I pushed that magic outline button. And so this was the outline. The W itself was actually a satin stitch, which I didn't want to use on my quilt. I wanted more of an outline running stitch. So I picked a W, I said outline, and then I added a bunch of them and again made them larger and smaller. And why in the world did she do a W? No, not because my last name is West, but because the back of the quilt is Wisconsin Badgers. And so the W's are for Wisconsin. So it was just a fun way to quilt this quilt. And again, this stitches out in just a few minutes for each hooping. Next one, many of you might have already seen this. This was a panel that was on our website. Hopefully everybody can still hear me all right. This is a panel, and oh, by the way, good news, we had run out of these twice. We just got 2 new bolts in. They're back up on the website, sewingbasket.biz, and we added a new category. If you go to sewingbasket.biz and click shop at the top of the page, one of the categories on the shopping page is as seen on our videos. So it'll be right in that category if you see anything on the videos that we talk about. So I wanted to quilt this, and I don't free motion. I can teach you how to free motion, but I don't have the hand-eye coordination or the artistic ability to figure out what to do. So I took this and went to my embroidery machine. And on the bigger machines, I mentioned they have that built-in design center. And so what I did, and I'm going to show you how this is done in a few minutes on a different panel, I used my big hoop and I put it around that big pumpkin. And then I traced around the pumpkin and I said, fill it in with this design. Then I traced around this little pumpkin and I said, fill it in with this different design. And then I went around this guy. And then I went down to these bottom ones. These are all different fills. This little squiggle that's on the lasts on my barrel. And then I also went in, and in these leaves, again I mentioned I don't draw well, but I grabbed my stylus on my machine and I just did a straight line, and then I did just some little jaggedy lines, and here I'm going to show you the back so you can see what they look like. And that created the texture on all of my leaves. So this was all done inside the embroidery machine. So it was really fun. It's something that I personally could have never done free motion. It wouldn't have looked anything like I wanted it to. But it was really fun to do on the machine. And in order to do those fills, you do need to have one of the machines with a design center in it. Now I'm going to move on. Oh, this is one last thing. This was all built in that design center. You have the ability to create very, very intricate things. In here, I had a square, and I added this shape, and then I added some flowers, and I changed the stitching. This was all done inside the embroidery machine just by picking shapes and saying, oh, fill this outside in with what looks like a brick. Fill this in with a mini stipple. Oh, do this in a candlewick stitch. So all of that is just choices within the design center inside the machine. So it's really a fun process. Next is the option to purchase designs. If you say, oh yeah, I can't even draw those leaves like Elaine did, I can purchase a design. I like snowflakes. This was a design, different snowflake designs. These were anywhere from 99 cents to $1.99, and I just picked 3 different ones. And again, I duplicated, oh, these two are the same, I just made this one a little bit smaller. And I put that many, I had this big of a hoop, so I put them in there. And that's what's quilted around these Christmas trees. Some are over the trees. Excuse me.
Just hold, I'm going to zoom.
Okay. And so this, again, I just hooped and stitched the snowflakes. Okay. See that all right?
Yep.
So that, to me, was really a fun way to quilt a winter quilt with a fancy snowflake that I never could have drawn. This is a little runner in a kit we have this year, and I called up those same snowflakes, and I used a small hoop. Just grab that. Use that smaller hoop and just did one snowflake here, one over here, one over here. So those all fit inside. I could have put these a little closer and actually managed to get a couple in there. But I just wanted to sort of plunk these around the quilt as though it were snowing. And so that's a purchase design. You download them off the internet and put them onto a USB stick. The USB stick goes right into your embroidery machine. Next one is a bigger quilt. You wonder how large a quilt you can do. Well, again, that depends. Oops, I just dropped my sample. That depends on how large the throat of your machine is. The smaller machines, just like a small sewing machine, only has a 6.5-inch throat. The medium-sized machines have an 8.5-inch throat. The larger machines, 11.5. Just like the sewing machines. The larger your throat space from your needle to the back of your machine, the more quilt you can fit through there. So if I'm doing a large quilt like this one, and this is, I want to say it's about 75 by 75. If I
Well, it
remember
fits on that
correctly.
twin upstairs pretty good.
It
So
fits on the twin bed upstairs. So this is a quarter of it that you're looking at it here.
I'm going to back up just a little bit.
Yep. I can. It's a big one.
Yep.
Okay? And so when I quilt on my embroidery machine, I need to be able to take my hoop whatever I'm going to stitch, and the hoop has to be able to flow freely in the machine, and I'm going to show you that in a few minutes. But as long as that quilt can move around, I can stitch it in my embroidery machine. And so again, I only have to get to the middle to do a couple here, then I can turn the quilt around, so I only ever have to get to the middle. I don't have to have the entire quilt stuffed in there. So this was pretty comfortable to do. Much bigger than this. I know people who have done a queen size and a king size. You can do it. I personally think that's more of a challenge than I want to deal with. I don't often do quilts that large, But I would, on a queen, you can do it. My recommendation is support your local long armor on those really big ones and use this for that kind of double and smaller size quilts. This one, when you buy what's called a design set, this is my little stitch out sample. This, when
Hold it up again.
okay, sorry.
I missed it.
Okay. So this is
There you
actually
go.
a triangular shape. This goes into my setting triangles along the edge of the quilt. So that would stitch right there, and on the corner, it stitches right there. So this is my template to show me where it lays out. When you, keep talking loud.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for the reminder. When you buy a design set on an embroidery design, a set of quilting designs always has 4 shapes. There's always a triangle that fits your setting squares and your corners. There's a square that will fit in a quilt block. There's usually a round, and then there's also a rectangle, a long thin. The rectangle is for your outer borders. And so this particular design set, there were 40 different designs in it, 4 in a set. So I have 4 that have this kind of a swirly look. I have a square, a rectangle, a triangle, and a circle that all are from the same set. They all match. And then there's another one with a different look, 4 of those. So in that set, it was $39, and there were 10 different designs in 4 different shapes. So, and then you can use them over and over again on all different things. But just to give you a feel for what's involved with design sets.
Just hold it. I want to zoom in on the middle round one.
Yep.
There you go. So that's would have been the square.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And
There's
again,
also a small square, the same design shrunk inside the pieced square. All right. And then I'm going to get to one other purchased option. There is a designer who does a great job, and she does a thing called edge-to-edge quilting with your embroidery machine. And that makes it look like you took it to a long armor. And I'm going to, this is a big one that's in process. Her designs fill a particular rectangular space, and the way that you do it is you do a full row and another row and another row, and you keep working, filling rows from the top of the quilt on. So this one is just in process, and it also is a big one.
you got to find them.
Yep.
There they
Find
are.
Where I'm done here. Let me just take this middle section right here. You can see right up this section.
Kind of hold it up a little bit.
Yep.
There you go.
So here's the top of my quilt, and this was my first. So I stitch one here, and then I move this down, and I stitch another, and I move it down, and I stitch another. So I do an entire column, and then I take my next design, and I don't have my second column done yet. I've got just the very first one here. So then I go here and down another column, and I keep filling in my columns. And so when it's done, it all fits together and it looks like it was taken to a long arm quilter, but it's edge to edge on your embroidery machine. And she makes many, many design sets. There's well over 100 designs, probably now easily over 150. And I'm going to show you a little more detail on how those are done on a little smaller project in just a minute after I show you another sample. Those are fun. This is another one of her designs. This is her daisy. And I thought, oh, that would be great on a placemat. And so on this placemat, I didn't do real much quilting. I put one of these just right in the center. You can kind of see it on there. And I'm going to do a little straight line quilting around the outside. This stitch is in under 3 minutes, and this placemat is quilted. On this one, I did the same design, only I put 2 next to each other. So it goes all the way out to the border. And so on the back, you can see that quilting goes all the way out to the edges. You see that all right? So what a quick, fun way to stitch out quilting on placemats, on table runners. I just keep going all the way down and across. Most table runners are between 4 and 6 hoopings. I can usually quilt a table runner in easily under an hour, and they look really, really nice. I'm always happy when I do them that way. I'm happy with the results. And now I'm going to show you everybody's favorite, the baby feet. The baby feet are also an edge-to-edge quilting design, and I'm going to show you the difference in hoop size. Okay. So this is my my 6 by 10 hoop.
Is it with the blue?
Yes, there it is, thank you. So this is my 6 by 10 hoop. Okay. This one is my 8 by 12 hoop. And this one is my 10 by 14 or my 9.5 by 14 inch hoop. And I did these as a sample because I wanted to get a feel for difference in time and how much it took to hoop. And I did some different samples. This one in the 6 by 10 hoop, this one took 35 hoopings. So I had to do my columns, took me 35 hoopings to do the whole quilt. And each hooping takes, by the time you get it hooped and stitch it, about 10 minutes. So that gives you a feel for it. By moving to the next bigger hoop, I only have to do 20 hoopings. And the stitch time is just different by about 1 minute per hooping. And then the big one, I only have to hoop 15 times. So that's what leads to hoop envy and the fact that size matters in embroidery. Same designs, the feet change size by just a little, but it's just a cute overall design. And I'm going to show you my in-process baby quilt here. And this is, here's my top. There's my feet. All right, here we go. So I have one column done and another column done, and I'm ready to do my next column over. And I'm going to just show you what I do. I take my little stencil here that I've stitched out, and all the directions are in her book. She does a great job. So my next one goes here, and there's a little, you can see the start and end where they connect. Right here.
Just a minute. There we go.
Okay. So this dot is going to connect right here. And so I lay this out. I can see through here. I line up those two dots, and I get that nice and straight. And I put that where I want. She has you use a couple pins to hold it in place. I have a favorite paperweight that I like that holds it nicely, which says, "What would you do if you knew you could not fail? You would quilt with your embroidery machine." So my paperweight holds it here. And then I take my hoop. My hoop is in 2 pieces. My top hoop, I put some sticky tape. This is double stick tape. I put a layer of it around my hoop. I've already done it on these 3 sides. This one I still have the paper on. This is the same tape that we use when we put zippers in. Okay, so what that does is it makes the back of my hoop sticky. And this is exactly the same size as the inside of my hoop. So I'm going to lay this right on here. I'm going to line up my crosshairs, and that tape is going to have me stick the hoop to the quilt so it doesn't shift and move on me when I go put the other piece of the hoop beneath it. And I'm going to slide this right under here. And I think I had my hoop set to the right size. Push this right in. At a bad angle here. There we go. Oh, not quite in. I should be on a flat surface and I'm on a pretty good angle here. tighten my hoop just a little more. I thought I had it set well enough for us, but. And this is just to show you that it's not absolutely simple and you just do this. Okay? So here we go, my hoop's a little further open. There we go, popped right in. And I'm gonna do that. And I'm gonna tighten my hoop just a smidge. And now we're gonna walk over to the embroidery machine. Cheryl's gonna flip around, and we're actually gonna put this in the machine and show you how you quilt it. All right, so here I am. I have my hoop, and I'm ready to go. I'm gonna go to my machine.
Louder.
Okay, I'm gonna go to my machine, and I'm gonna call up my design, which I have on a USB stick. You can see my little feet. It tells me it's 1,800 stitches, and it's gonna take 2 minutes. And I hit embroidery, and now I put my hoop in. On the Brother machines, these slide in really nice, just straight from the front. I put my hoop under my needle, and I slide this little track right in. And then I have to be real careful that I get my quilt loose. This is just like when you're quilting any other way. If there's any drag on this, your stitches will deform. So you got to be sure that this isn't tucked underneath, that everything's out of the way. And this is all loose. My arm can move freely, and I can lift this up, and then I'm ready to go. And she starts to stitch. And this is going to take 2 minutes to stitch. We don't have to watch the whole thing unless you're all dying to watch it. Everybody likes to watch it run. But what I'm doing while it's stitching is I'm just being careful that none of this quilt is tucked underneath the hoop and that it's loose and the machine can move its hoop freely. So this is where if you have a really big quilt, part of that quilt has to be rolled up tightly in here and it has to be able to move. And that's why I say, yes, you can do a queen size, but that gets to be pretty big and you have to be really careful that you've got that hoop moving freely. And Cheryl, I think you can see the first pair of little feet are done.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna let this run. Do we want to watch the next?
Talk about the tack. You can see that.
Great idea. Cheryl said, you can see my little micro tacks here. This is held together. You can see on the back of my quilt these little black, this is my test area here. I was showing somebody how to use it. But these are little micro tacks. What they are is they're holding my top and my batting together, just like you would pin baste a quilt. This is a little tack gun. I clip these out when I'm done. The really nice thing about using these with an embroidery machine rather than safety pins is when I go to put my hoop in, the safety pins can be in the way of my hoop. If I hoop over one of these, it's right in there, you don't notice it. And if I stitch over one, I can still cut them out. If I had safety pins, I would put my hoop on and I'd take all the pins out of my stitch area and then go ahead and stitch. But it's really nice with the micro tack not to have to worry about where any of your pins are. And now I'll show you, tell you about one of my duh moments. When I first used the micro tack, I thought, okay, here I am, I'm gonna put my layers together. My background is white, so I'm gonna use my white micro tacks. That would be the duh moment. You use the black ones so you can see them because they all have to be cut out. It took me twice as long to snip them out because I had,
Did you hit some?
I am out of thread.
Of course.
Of course. I'm going to just stop here. I'm going to cut this. And I am going to take this out. I put a short bobbin in there and I should have known better. So this is what I've got done so far. As soon as I change my bobbin thread, we'll be all set. All right. I am going to show you something else for a moment here. The last thing, and then we'll wrap up. I want to just grab my other panel, and this panel was kind of similar to the pumpkin panel that I showed you. This is what I'm working on right now. And this is the goose panel that we have in. And what I'm doing is I'm quilting. I quilted inside the geese right now, and I quilted this water area. And this has been folded in and out of my bag a bunch of times. But now I'm going to just hoop this top portion. It's going to take me just a second over here. I have my big hoop, except I want my bigger hoop. Okay. And this is the design center that I talked about in the machines that lets you do all kinds of cool things. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is hoop this upper section. Alright. And I'm going to take this over to the machine. And again, actually, I'm going to call up, my first step would be putting this into the machine, and I would hit the scan button. And what that does is save a picture of what's inside my hoop. I've already done that. So I'm going to go into the design center on my machine, and I'm going to just call up that picture that I already scanned. Normally you would just stick this in the machine, hit the scan button, and it would automatically bring up this. And so you can see, there's my goose. I've hooped it just a little bit over, but that was my original scan. So here he is, and now I want to fill in my goose and maybe my trees. So what I can do is I go in and I select one of the built-in fills. There's all different ones. Every machine has different fills. They come with 10 or 15 different fills. The larger machines come with even more. I'm going to just take this little leaf one for right now and pick that. And I'm going to say I want this design in my trees and on my goose.
I'm caught on your chair.
I'm stuck on my chair?
I'm trying to get the shadow of the light out of here.
Okay. Is that better?
Okay.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I just filled that entire area with that kind of leafy fill. Well, if I only want it on my duck and on my trees, I can erase out the middle. I pick my eraser. I'm going to pick a big eraser. And now I can go, and it actually is going to start erasing that fill. And I'm going to pretend I'm doing just this long. I go around these little guys, but I'm not going to do it right now. You can see I'm kind of along the edge here. And I'm going to go over to that goose. And then I can erase all of this. And I can erase, oop, go back. I can erase all of this background as well. And I have a magnifier. I can make it get real big, and I can bring it over. So here's my tree, and I can erase in here and get rid of whatever I don't want. Okay? And if I mistakenly, I went into my tree, I can take my paintbrush and I can go back and fill it in. And I can go back to my eraser and erase some more. And I just work my way around my whole diagram till I get rid of everything I don't want. Those little guys I don't want. And once I'm finished, you can see I've got a mess here, but this tree, I can erase all the rest of that. Once I'm ready to go, I hit next, and I put this hoop in the machine, which is, when I scan it, I don't move my hoop. I go in, I do all my adjustment on my machine, I put this in, I hit embroider, and it's going to fill that design in wherever I left it on the screen. So the trees, the goose's neck, that's all going to be filled with that decorative stitch. I could come back later, and if you remember early on, I talked about a little swirl that I thought looked like the wind. I could take that little swirl and it's in here. I can take that little swirl, and it's going to be hard to see on that screen, but I can make it smaller, and I could drag those little swirls and fill all those little swirls in this area. So it lets me create my own quilting with decorative fills right inside the machine. So they do some pretty cool stuff. That's all I've got for today. I hope you enjoyed the idea of being able to quilt with your embroidery machine. Stop in the shop and take a look at some of the samples. Those of you who are in my boat that want a way to have a fun, neat quilting design without having to be able to draw, this one works for me. Hope you enjoyed this little slideshow.
I just want to add one thing that Elaine didn't mention was a lot of you might be saying, I own a big, beautiful quilting machine for piecing. I don't need a new big sewing machine. The beautiful thing is you can buy embroidery only machines, so you can spend a little more money and get the bigger hoops because you don't need to invest in all the sewing machine side of it. It only does embroidery. The bonus of having two different machines is while you're stitching your embroidery on one machine, you can be sitting there and piecing on the other machine. So if it's something that intrigues you, but you don't think you want to give up the nice machine that you already have, you don't have to. You can come and look at some of our embroidery only machines as an option for you to be able to do this type of quilting at home.
Sounds good. Thank you, Cheryl. Stop in the shop and just see some of the samples. They're fun to look at. We really appreciate your time. Have a great day. Thanks to those who stuck with me and even listened to me talk about embroidery.
Yep.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.